Alan Yuma Productions presents The Wings of Freedom. Sponsored by Millionaire of Yuma.
It's easy to forget. It's easy to have never known. Almost 70 years ago, Americans took to the sky to defend our freedom and help save the world from oppression. The efforts of the young men and women flying in these combat aircraft helped bring an end to World War II. Each year, the Collins Foundation sends its World War II airplanes around the United States to honor our veterans and to connect this history with the public. It's a history lesson that is truly unforgettable.
The Wings of Freedom Tour, we're on our 19th year of supporting this educational effort by taking 3 World War II bombers and now a World War II fighter on a national tour that starts in Florida, goes all over the United States. Last year we did 130 cities.
One of the things about having these airplanes fly around the United States is that people get to see them, hear them, touch them, whereas the negative part of having them sit in a museum is, one, they're not accessible to everybody. Not everybody can go find the museums. They can't touch them when they get there. They can't walk through them when they get there. They can't hear them when they're there. Here they are able to do all of that.
One primary goal is to share with the American people what it really meant to us to have these airplanes to give us the freedom we have today.
Now, the history of the B-17.
One of the most popular and recognizable planes of World War II is the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, a 4-engine heavy bomber made famous for flying very dangerous daylight missions over Germany during World War II.
A lot of guys fought and died in these airplanes. A lot of men and women sacrificed their lives to build them and get them to the front. And to actually get in the airplane and actually fly it, it's truly an honor. And it's a great flying airplane. It's a pilot's airplane.
In the forward area there would have been the Bombardier. The airplane was built around the Norden bomb site, which is right up front. And this airplane was built to get that guy to the target so he could drop the bombs. To his left was the navigator. He's got a table there with a compass and a drift meter and everything that he needs to make sure that the airplane's on course and going to the right place. They all had machine guns. The Bombardier ran the chin turret, which is out front, 250 caliber machine guns. The navigator ran the 2 guns that you can see visible here, the left and the right. As you come backwards here towards the flight deck area, you can climb up on the step. And the first thing you're going to come across here is the top turret. The flight engineer for the airplane, or flight mechanic, would have ran this turret, and he actually had a chair that he sat down in. He had 250 caliber machine guns. Up front here we have the flight deck where the pilot and co-pilot sat, and this is where everything really happened to get the airplane off the ground and to the target and back home again. So this compartment was called the bomb bay. It could hold up to between 5,000 and 6,000 pounds of bombs depending on the target and how much fuel they were carrying. So we're in the radio room now. And this is where the radio operator would communicate with all the crews and the ground during the mission. Everything from Morse code to receivers and transmitters and an oxygen supply system. And he also would have had a machine gun above us here. What we have here is the ball turret, and this is probably the most famous turret ever made. It rests below the aircraft. The crewman would have been inside there, and in combat he would climb in and protect the bottom of the airplane. And the old wives' tale is that if the gear wouldn't come down, he'd get squished, but that's actually a wives' tale. You can actually crank him out, or there's a whole bunch of ways to get him out. And that leads back to the waist gunner area, to the 2 side gunners that protected the left and right flank of the airplane. And they each had 50 caliber machine guns each, and that leads to the tail, which also had a gunner in the back to protect the tail of the airplane.
tours the country painted as the famous 909. The original 909 completed an astounding 140 missions without loss or abort. The consolidated B-24 Liberator flew in all theaters of the war. Over 18,000 of these heavy bombers were built, the largest production run of any military aircraft in American history. The Collins Foundation's B-24 saw combat in the Pacific Theater. The Foundation acquired this B-24 in 1984. After an extensive 97,000-hour restoration, the Collins Foundation's fully restored B-24J took to the air in 1989.
As you come up the ladder, you're going to be confronted by two machine guns. These are 50 caliber guns with the windows wide open. There's no glass to protect you. Got about 600 rounds per gun to shoot down enemy fighters. And you were also bumping into the guy on the other side because there were two crewmen right here shooting. So you have to be wary of each other. Towards the back you have a rear turret which you actually climb in and sit down in. And there would have been at least 3 guys in this area here plus the ball turret gunner who went down below the airplane in the round turret there. As we make our way to the center of the aircraft, we're going to enter the bomb bay. It held between 6,000 and 8,000 pounds of bombs, depending on the target. The bomb bays will close. It's like a roll-top desk. To your immediate right is the radio operator's chair. The radio man would sit there. Same as a B-17, you had a radio operator. You also had a flight engineer and top turret gunner, and his turret's right above your head there, that dome structure. Up front is the flight deck. So that's where the cockpit is, that's where the pilot and co-pilot sat.
This B-24 is painted with markings that commemorate the B-24 Witchcraft that flew an incredible 130 missions in Europe and never had a crew member injured or killed.
Don't put yourself and others at risk. Use your seatbelts. It's the law. Be responsible for yourself and others.
My wife and I both came up with the idea. We're both interested in education, and we feel that people can learn better about history, particularly if they can participate in it. So we set up the foundation in 1979 with the purpose of supporting living history, and have done that in a variety of forms. Initially very much transportation related, carriage rides, winter ice cutting events and so on. And then as we evolved further into it, we got into the aviation, and of course a lot of that is very much living history.
These 3 aircraft probably have to be the most loved aircraft that I know of. We have a group of mechanics that fly with the aircraft, and this happens over the course of 10 months that, we're in a city every 3 days, so every time we land they go through a systems check. Every time the planes are open and to the public, you always see the crew going around checking the oil, checking the bearings, landing gear. They're constantly being looked after. And so when you look through the aircraft and you see the oxygen canisters and the wiring and the guns and all the radio equipment, all of that is original. Exactly what you'd see 60 years ago. And it's that historical experience that we're really trying to get across to the people that come out to visit the bomber aircraft. You'll see that in addition to experiencing the aircraft by crawling through them, one of the most unmistakable sounds is a radial engine from a B-17 or a B-24 or a B-25. The sight of it alone, and they're beautiful aircraft.
World War II, and a fearsome battle raged over the skies in Europe. Among the airplanes that flew in this battle, the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress stands out as a plane responsible for aiding the Allies in winning the war, a true symbol of American aerial power. Flying deep into Germany, and many times facing the fearsome Luftwaffe alone, the B-17 acquired its fame by sustaining a tremendous amount of damage and yet being able to return its crew safely home. But a durable airplane alone did not win the war. It was won by the men who flew her. Once, thousands of these airplanes roamed the skies, each taking 10 men to face their destiny at the mercy of their enemies. When Nazi Germany conquered Europe, and the only hope of freedom came from above, these flying machines and the young men that flew them became hope for those on the ground that liberation would soon come. With war's end, however, the incredible tales of bravery were now just distant memories, as aircraft surplus was recycled as fast as they were produced. 12,731 B-17s, at the cost of $300,000 each, showed the ability of an entire generation to mobilize their efforts towards a common goal, a collective effort that hasn't existed since. With faster and better planes to replace the old fortress, and metal needed to help build a fast-growing nation, most B-17s met their end on the chopping block. For the military, the time for the antiquated Flying Fortress had passed, and the glory it acquired during the war was about to exist only in war tales. But through the efforts of private individuals, a handful of these airplanes survived, and today, B-17s fly again. Although several B-17s survived the many years since the war as static displays, the last 13 airplanes that fly give us an incredible perspective into the amazing combat experiences of this flying machine. They bring back to life astonishing stories of survival, and by preserving these memories, they have helped elevate the history behind the Flying Fortress to an almost folkloric tale. Today, there are many struggles in keeping these airplanes flying, but there is hope that a new generation of owners and volunteers, with an appreciation for the history behind the B-17 Flying Fortress, will keep them flying for generations to come.
I think there's a few different things. I think one of them is the size. And you look at the size, and I think a lot of people, they see them in TV, they've seen them on, the movie The Memphis Belle, and then to come and see it in life, and then you say, wow, this is the B-17. This is what we see in the movies. And for them to actually tour it is even more exciting for them. They get to actually go inside the aircraft and see what these guys did, and where they sat, and what their jobs were in the aircraft. It's exciting. You go out there and just to look at it, it's beautiful. And what we do it for is for the thrill for the people. We fly the plane so they can actually hear her engines. Even though I'm not from that era, just to hear the engine start and the sound of those engines, it gives you goosebumps. I mean, there's no sound than the sound of the B-17 when she starts, and when she's flying by.
B-17 was probably the strongest aircraft you ever had out there as a bomber. It could sustain a serious amount of damage, battle damage, and still make it back. 2 engines, no problem. There was one point where a gentleman had lost 3 engines just as he had crossed the English coast and brought the plane back on 1 engine. Remarkable stories. There's another photograph of a 398th plane from Ned Hampstead where literally the front of the plane is gone. The bombardier and navigator section is gone, and all you have is from, a little part of the chin turret in there and the pilot's part back, and they brought the plane back. And you're wondering, how does a plane like that stay in the air? That was a testament to the durable strength of the plane to be able to withstand a lot of damage, yet still be able to bring that crew home.
The development of the B-17 is far from the reputation of durability and strength the airplane achieved during the war. In reality, this aircraft was almost not built. In 1934, the U.S. Army commissioned an all-metal multi-engine design airplane capable of carrying a 2,000-pound bomb load at a distance of 2,200 miles. With practically no continuing work and no future orders in sight, the small Boeing Airplane Company of Seattle, Washington, decided to go for broke and gamble $275,000 out of its $500,000 in cash for the development of Model 299. A year later, what rolled out of the final assembly hangar on Boeing Field was a massive airplane, truly ahead of its time. Its gigantic size, glistening all-metal skin, and 5 machine gun nests earned the plane the nickname, the Flying Fortress. During the test phase, the aircraft outperformed all expectations, eventually earning a small test order. But opponents still maintained that B-17s were too complex to fly, and that money should be spent on a greater number of smaller planes. But this was soon to change. December 1941. Pearl Harbor. The United States joined the war, and as quickly as they could be built, B-17s were departing to fight in all fronts. For the first time in the history of warfare, bombers would play a decisive role in weakening enemy production. Early combat experiences for B-17s, however, were disastrous, until the full potential of the airplane was realized by flying in massive combat box formations. While in the Pacific, B-17 served as transports and as interceptors of Japanese vessels. Early U.S. involvement in Europe was only successful when given heavy fighter cover. Early in the war, when both sides were equally matched, an average of 300 to 600 men per day would lose their lives, with only 35% of aircrews surviving to complete the 25-mission tour of duty. Casualties were high. Morale was low. What the Army desperately needed were heroes. And this came in the form of one of the most famous documentaries of World War II, The Memphis Belle.
Wyler's film, The Memphis Belle, did a lot to do that. If it would have been on a B-24, we may have been looking at the B-24 a little bit differently. But he chose the 8th Air Force and the Memphis Belle in particular to make a documentary on, which was seen by many, many Americans across, the country. And that was instilled in their mind that here was the plane that had attacked Fortress Europe and had brought, Hitler to his knees.
Pilot Captain Robert Morgan, industrial engineer from Asheville, North Carolina. He's flown this ship across the Atlantic.
Of course, we didn't know anything about this documentary. I mean, we knew that William Wyler was making some sort of documentary, but we thought it was just a training film. We didn't have any idea that he was going to really put it out as a World War II combat documentary. And we didn't know that we landed that it was going to be named the Memphis Belle. I always kidded him after we landed. He came up to me and he said, "Morgan, I got news for you." He said, "This documentary is going to be named the Memphis Belle." And you know what? I didn't think a thing about it. I said, "Well, so what?" Then I turned around to him and I said, "Bill, what would happen if we got shot out on this 25th mission?" He said, "Oh, we had a backup." And they did. They had an airplane called Hell's Angels. It was going to finish 25 missions, and then they would have been here talking to you.
It's called the greatest generation of our time. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Never at any one point in world history has one event shaped the outcome of so many lives as World War II did. And every person that fought in that war was fighting for the freedom of what we have today. It was paid at the cost of their lives.
It has been almost 60 years since Roy Test volunteered to fly the Flying Fortress in one of the most gruesome air battles the world has ever seen. In the end, over 25,000 men like him never returned home. Like Roy, those who did survive share an inseparable bond with their flying machines. 10 men from different backgrounds, fighting together to beat the incredible odds against them. Bombardier, navigator, pilot, co-pilot, top turret gunner that also served as an in-flight engineer, radio operator, ball turret, left, right, and tail gunners.
Story of its pilots.
You have read the history and you know our losses were great. It was nothing to lose on each day's mission 30, 40, 50, or 60 heavy bombers, B-24s and B-17s combined. And the records bear that out. And you're talking about you lose from 300 to 600 men in one day. A lot of times I'll tell people, well, we would lose more people in an hour than the entire Desert Storm left during the entire operation. That's just for comparison purposes. And they find that hard to believe, especially the younger people. But that's true, that's the way it was. We were losing 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 bombers most of the time during that part of the war. And you couldn't do a professional job, which you were trying to do, if you were worried about being shot down all the time. I won't say the fear was not there. The fear was always there. If anybody tells you that there was no fear, either he's lying or he wasn't there. If he was there on a mission, he was scared.
The fear was when I heard about the B-17. How impossible to shoot it down as a two airplane attack, It had to be at least 5 or 6 groups to attack from each side to make it happen. Going in there alone with your wingman is impossible. You sign your death certificate. And don't be afraid, if you die for the fatherland, You do it because you're put there by some force, by your government. And as you are there in the air trying to fly and to fight, you suddenly realize you're all alone. It's you or him. It's no glamour, it's no nothing. I mean, you don't get the feel that you will be a hero. You just get the feel, I want to get out of here.
Yeah, come back home alive.
Yeah.
On my 14th mission, I was shot down over Berlin while bombing the BMW aircraft engine factory, My entire squadron was shot down, all 12 bombers. And 33 were killed in the air and many more wounded. Of those who were able to bail out, 21 more were beaten to death by enraged civilians using sledgehammers and shovels. They hit a 6 o'clock high right over the tail, and I was up in the nose. And I had my thumb on the salvo switch, and I was watching the lead bomber way out there about half a mile in front of us. There were about 800 and some of us bombers there. And as soon as his first bomb would appear, I'd count 2, 1, press. Because I knew from briefing how far back I was from him and how many seconds it would take for my bombs to land just about where his were landing, you know. And all 12 of us went down in about 20 seconds, all down in flames. Thank heaven, my bomber went into a shallow glide. A lot of them just tore up and went down. That was it. So I was pretty lucky there. I'm here now, so.
This is the first time I'm looked through the aiming apparatus of B-17. Wow.
I feel a great deal of respect for the German military men.
Here's where I bailed out.
Before I was sort of passive about it, you know. They did what they had to do, we did what we had to do, but the last several years, I feel a camaraderie with them.
Throughout the world, B-17 airframes exist as static displays, many of them deteriorating due to weather exposure. Their decaying condition inspire a few private individuals to dream of seeing them once again in the air. But in their way, there are immense obstacles to overcome.
What we're trying to do is to put a B-17 in the air from whatever condition it's in right now, which is pretty bad for most of them. The B-17s that are now available are two things. They're hard to find and they're hard to finance. It's so you go to a lot of places, to a lot of people, to a lot of groups, to individuals. I've had a guy give me, here's a $100 bill, and here's your seed, you know, I hope it grows, that kind of thing. And that was a B-17 combat crewman, a pilot. And that's what we have to do is raise $1.5 million to put a B-17 in the air. And we have to convince them to say, we'll put her in the air. We don't want anything except to put her in the air, and that's what we want to do.
Trying to find somebody to work on it, that's the difficult part too, because these, you know, it's old technology, so people are kind of scarce to make parts for the airplane too. Hopefully they keep flying for a while, because it's a shame not to have one that can operate and people not being able to experience the sights and the sound of airplanes from a significantly historic era. Well, it's very satisfying, extremely satisfying to see them in the air once again. All the hard work and the sweat and the toil really was worth it.
That's one of the reasons I am here, is to try to pass on to younger people the history of the B-17 and what a history it is, you know, and try to get them interested enough to have organizations of their own going to see that the B-17s are preserved, the ones that are alive, you know, and flying, keep them flying. To just let them sit on the ground, I suppose that's okay for several of them. But for some of them, they ought to keep flying. They really ought to keep flying.
is, it's very important because us guys are dying off, and all that'll be left is what we've told people. But if we have these airplanes that are flying, that'll give people an opportunity to view and possibly imagine experiencing the experiences that we had in World War II.
I think you have to preserve the B-17 for the history of what it has accomplished, the history of what it's accomplished and what it stands for. As much for the plane itself as for the people that flew it, the people that gave their lives, the people that put everything on the line. They represent, to a new generation, a history lesson in what they're not taught nowadays in school. When they walk out there or see this plane flying or see it at an air show, they're going to start asking questions. And you hope that they ask the right questions and that the parents or the grandparents can give them the right answers of what took place at that point. Or they can ask the people there about what took place, or it will inspire them to want to go on and read more about what took place during that time period. The B-17, wherever it flies, draws a crowd. And not only old people and veterans that flew it, but a new generation, a young generation that wants to find out more, that has a thirst for knowledge and wants to find out what this plane did and wants to see it in the air. They don't want to go to a museum and see something sitting over there. It's not a fossil, it's not a relic. This thing can fly. It's up in the air. You can go and see this thing. You can ride in it. You know, you can have that experience.
Save lives. Help them to survive. They will pay you back 100%. Help us perform miracles. For more information, please call 928-782-1621 or visit hsoyuma.com.
I'm Ryan Keogh, and I'm the flight coordinator with the Collings Foundation's Wings of Freedom Tour. We're standing in front of the B-24 Liberator, built by Consolidated Aircraft Corporation in 1944. This aircraft is the last one of its type out of over 18,000 that were built. To this day, the B-24 Liberator still holds the record as the most produced multi-engine aircraft ever in history. The B-24 Liberator came out as a replacement originally for the B-17 Flying Fortress, but because of wartime conditions, the B-24 flew alongside the B-17 in many ways during the war and supplemented the aircraft, carried a little bit more bomb load, flew longer ranges, and actually flew more missions than the B-17 did, but never got the glory that the B-17 did because of the fact that B-17s were featured in movies like 12 O'Clock High and Memphis Belle, and it was pretty much dominantly covered by the News Corps during World War II. The B-24 flew in every single theater of operation, including the Pacific Campaign, the Aleutian Campaign, the China-Burma-India Theater, and of course the European Campaign, and even out of bases in North Africa and Italy. This particular aircraft is painted up as the highest mission scoring B-24 Liberator that flew in the 8th Air Force during World War II, which is Witchcraft, which flew with the 467th Bomb Group out of Rackheath, England. This aircraft, all these bombs on the side of the aircraft, actually represent all of the missions that this aircraft flew. It flew 130 independent missions, which came back intact without a single casualty on the aircraft. Built in 1944, this aircraft is not pressurized. It's not a jet, it's a piston-powered aircraft, so you get the rumble and roar of the engines all the time. It's a very almost Spartan interior. The skin of the aircraft is the same skin that you see on the inside. It's built like a warship. There's no accounting for comfort inside this aircraft because it had a mission, and that mission was to drop bombs on enemy targets from high altitudes. And of course they had to have protective armaments. That's why you see all the gun positions and turrets scattered throughout the aircraft. So this aircraft really was built for one singular purpose. And so as a result, the crew members are actually kind of secondary to the aircraft, and folks that take a chance to fly on this aircraft will understand that. There are really no seats in the aircraft. You're seated in belted positions for takeoff and landing. But once you're up in the air, you can explore through the airplane as much as you'd like to, which means crawling through really tight little bomb bays, or squeezing your way into a turret, or working your way around other turrets or other gun positions on the aircraft. It's not easily accessible, and it was really a game for the for 19, 20-year-olds that flew in these airplanes during World War II. A lot of our veterans and a lot of their families remark that a person, of a normal size these days, 5'9" tall and, maybe 200 pounds, it's not easy for a person like that to get through the aircraft. And these aircraft were really built for smaller crews back then. They endured a lot of stuff. They endured really, really cold temperatures. They flew at about 20,000 feet, where the engines barely had enough oxygen to run. That's why they had to be turbocharged. Minus 30-degree temperatures. They had to wear leather flying suits. They had to have oxygen masks on all the time. If you had your oxygen mask off for 2 minutes at that altitude, you were passing out. You were pretty much dead. So it was a very, very hard environment to begin with. And then having to endure enemy fighter aircraft coming up and trying to shoot you out of the skies, and then also dealing with anti-aircraft fire coming from the ground over 5 miles up and exploding all around you, throwing shrapnel everywhere, puncturing through the thin skin of these aircraft. It was an enormous task for pilots and crew members to fly.
The newest acquisition of the Wings of Freedom Tour is a rare two-seat, dual-control P-51C Mustang. This is the only P-51C in existence today that has a full set of dual controls. Fast, well-made, and able to fly long distances, the P-51 Mustang became one of the world's most successful and recognizable fighter aircraft. The P-51s were the first fighters to escort Allied bombers all the way to targets deep into Germany and back. The Foundation's P-51C was named Betty Jane to honor Colonel Charles M. McCorkle, a P-51 pilot and commander of the 31st Fighter Group. McCorkle was a fighter ace with 11 confirmed kills. There's a saying in the warbird community that characterizes the effort of the Wings of Freedom Tour: keep 'em flying. It takes enormous effort and resources to keep these planes in the air. It is all made possible by the hard work, interest, and contributions of people across the country.
When you use an airplane as often as we do and so forth, it uses up parts and stuff like that. So it's a constant maintenance program all the time. Not only fixing stuff that's broken, but normal inspections that are required at different intervals.
I'm glad to be here today in Yuma, able to share Betty Jane and the rest of the aircraft with the public here. It's a real honor and privilege to be able to take care of such a piece of history. A lot of people maintained the aircraft, not just the pilots, but the people who built the aircraft as well. we'll have Rosie the Riveters come out. I had a lady that come out last year. She was 18, and for 2 years she built P-51 wings. So I sat her up on the wing, let her have a little reminisce with history. All that was much needed support that the people on the front lines depended on.
The Wings of Freedom Tour is an experience in history that can be found nowhere else in the world. It's an event that enables Americans to learn more about our heritage through direct participation. Keeping these aircraft flying across the United States provides a unique opportunity to honor those who sacrificed for our freedoms and to keep these amazing pieces of history alive for generations to come.
This is a C model P-51, which is the first, one of the first generation P-51s that had the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine in it. This aircraft is a very high performance aircraft, and this is one of the few that's configured as a dual control 2-seat aircraft. Traditionally, P-51s were built as single-seat aircraft. This aircraft has been modified to be dual control to allow folks to get the opportunity to fly this aircraft and take control of the Cadillac of the skies, as we like to call it, and fly and do aerobatics in this aircraft in a flight training environment, which we uniquely offer as part of the Wings of Freedom Tour. Our B-24 Liberator is a flying aircraft. It flies from city to city on over a 110 city nationwide tour. Our B-17, B-24, and P-51 all offer flight experiences, which is a wonderful way of folks being able to get a chance to experience history by flying for a brief 30-minute mission. You can't find that kind of experience in a museum that you go to, so it's a wonderful opportunity, and we bring the museum to local communities like Yuma.
This man paid $2,200 for 30 minutes to have the experience to fly in the Mustang P-51.
All right, you're all strapped in now.
My very best memory.
Channel 1 Yuma Production.